Hello, welcome to Lesson 7-2, Find Common Denominators. Our I can statement says, I can find common denominators for fractions with unlike denominators. Please pause the video and write down your lesson title and I can statement in your math journal. We have vocabulary for this lesson, and our vocabulary terms are equivalent fractions and common denominator. An equivalent fraction means fractions that are of equal value. So you'll notice in the example that 1/4 is equivalent or equal to 3/12. And you can also see this by looking at the fraction strips. We will be using those and have those available throughout the unit to show some equivalencies like this. It shows that 1/4 can also be broken up into 3/12. And today we're going to look at using least common multiple to find a common denominator to help us work with this concept as well. And that leads us into our next vocabulary term of common denominator. The denominator represents, and it's the bottom portion of the fraction, it represents the number of equal parts in one whole. So you'll notice that these two fractions have common denominators of 15. 15 is a common denominator for both the original fraction of 2/3 and 1/5. And today we'll look and kind of do a refresher of how we find common denominator. That's really our whole lesson goal for this topic. So please write down equivalent fractions, and I would write out or draw the example beneath, and then do common denominator the same as well, and as well write out the sentence below. If you need a moment, go ahead and pause and press play whenever you're ready to move on to the next section of the lesson. So for our problem today, it says that Sue wants 1/2 of a rectangular pan of cornbread, and Dina wants 1/3 of the same pan of cornbread. How should you cut the cornbread so that each girl gets the size portion that she wants? And you can solve this problem any way you choose. Well, let's do a little prep work before we start this problem so that we have a plan for solving. We're going to do that using cubes. And so we're going to circle 1/2 of that rectangular pan of cornbread, and we're also going to circle 1/3 of that pan of cornbread. A couple of key words or things that we need to underline are actually how should we cut the cornbread so that each of the girls gets the size portion that she wants, so that Sue gets 1/2 and Dina gets 1/3 of the same cornbread. I need to know that these are in a rectangular pan and that this one's the same pan, so the pans are the same size. And then I also kind of want to put myself in this. So let's say that myself and Mrs. Tim, we were going to cut up this pan of cornbread and I wanted 1/2 and she wanted 1/3. So I have to think about in the real world, how would I actually figure that out? I'm going to give you a little time to work this problem. You may want to draw out the actual pans of cornbread. If you're familiar with finding a common denominator through finding least common multiple, that's also a good strategy to think about as you move forward with solving this problem. Take a few minutes, draw and write and work out your solution in your journal, and then press play whenever you're ready to go through the solution with me, and I'll show you a couple of examples. All right, so we're going to go ahead and look at the solution to this problem. And there's a couple of different ways I'm going to show you how this works. The first way I'm going to show you is by thinking about finding least common multiple to find a common denominator. This is the step we take to find common denominators, and this is one of the beginning steps that we're going to look at when we're working with adding or subtracting fractions. So, put a little A in there. All right, so we're going to use least common multiple to find common denominator. So our fractions are 1/2 and 1/3. Now, whenever we're going to add, subtract, or compare fractions, I have to get them in the same form so that I'm comparing or adding or subtracting them correctly. So I can't work with a denominator of 2 and a denominator of 3. I've got to find a common denominator. And one strategy to do that is to find the least common multiple that both 2 and 3 share. So I'm going to list out the multiples of 2. And basically, I get the multiples of 2 by skip counting by 2 or thinking about 2 times 1, 2 times 2, 2 times 3. Multiples can go on forever, so I don't need to write out a lot of them. But I am going to write out a few so I can find the smallest, which is what least means, number that both 2 and 3 have in common. So I'm going to list out the multiples of 2. So a multiple of 2 is 2 because 2 times 1 is 2. My next multiple of 2 is 4 because 2 times 2 is 4. My next multiple of 2 is 6 because 2 times 3 is 6. My next multiple of 2 is 8 because 2 times 4 is 8. All right, now I'm going to list out my multiples of 3. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. And 3 times 4 is 12. And I'm going to stop there because I see that I have a multiple that is common between these two. Sometimes when you're listing out multiples, you'll have more than one common multiple, but we always want to choose the smallest or the least common multiple. So in this case, the least common multiple is 6. So if I'm going to find the common denominator for both 1/2 and 1/3, I want that common denominator to be 6. Now I have to look at, well, what would my numerator be, the top part of my fraction? And you can write this a couple of different ways. I'm just going to show you the way I've always written it. You may choose to write it similar to the way that was shown in the vocabulary problem, and that's great too. All right, so what I do is I think about 3 times 6, or 3 times what is going to give me 6? And I know that was 3 times 2. And anything I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. So I'm going to multiply my numerator by 2 as well. And I am going to get 2/6 as an equivalent fraction to 1/3. Now I think about, what do I need to do to the 2 to make it 6? I needed to multiply that times 3. Anything I do to the denominator, I must also do to the numerator. And I get an equivalent fraction for 1/2 would be 3/6. So it says, how should you cut the cornbread so that each girl gets the same size portion she wants? Well, I'm going to actually draw a couple of pans of cornbread. And I'll try to make them similar. So this is going to be Sue. And this is going to be Dina's pan. Now Sue's pan originally, if she wanted half of this pan, we would have had to just cut it in half, and this would have been Sue's portion. Now Dina wanted 1/3, so I would have had to cut this into 3 parts. And she just wanted this much. So this is what those original fractions look like of 1/2 and 1/3. But now I'm going to take the pan of cornbread, the one that we're actually working with, and because I have a common denominator of 6, if I divide this pan of cornbread into 6 equal pieces, it's going to make it really easy for me to know how much cornbread Sue would get and how much Dina would get. So when I divide this into 6 pieces, I'm going to do 3 this way. Oh, I kind of messed up my line there. Let's do a little erasing. that line right. Oop, I don't want to erase our line. Let me make my line again. Okay. So I have divided this piece, this pan of cornbread, that should be 6 equal pieces. Okay. Sue needs to get 3 6. So she's going to get all of this. She's going to get 3 of the 6 pieces. And Dina would get 2 of the 6 pieces. Let me change colors so we can see what Dina would get. So Dina is getting 2 of the 6 pieces. So that would be a way in real life where I could give one person half of the pan of cornbread and another person a third of the pan of cornbread. Now, what they were really wanting us to answer is how should you cut the cornbread so that each girl gets the size portion that she wants? We would cut the cornbread into 6 pieces, and that's our common denominator. And 6 is our common denominator. Let's take a look at how some other people might have solved this problem, and it may be similar to the way that you solved it as well. Here's Eric's work. Eric did some work similar to what we did, except he just did the drawing visual portion of our work instead of finding least common multiple to find common denominator. But he got the same answer that we did. He knew that he would have to cut that into 6 equal pieces in order to give Sue 1/2 or 3/6 of the cornbread and to give Dina 1/3 or 2/6 of the cornbread. Our next student work started out similar to the way we did, but there was a mistake in the solution here because the pieces aren't the same size pieces. They're not cut into equal size pieces. All right, at this time, I need for you to write the secret word at the top of your paper in your math journal next to the title. The secret word is going to be the word tree. So I need you to write the word tree at the top of your math journal page next to the title. At this time, please summarize your thinking in your math journal by writing a nice paragraph about the strategy that you used or your new learning about how to find common denominator by finding least common multiple. These are kind of important building blocks that we're going to be working with from here on out in our unit on fractions. So you'll want to be really familiar with that, but we'll do practice in class to help you become really confident with it. So please write a thorough summary and be ready to share that in class tomorrow.